Welcome to Unmasked, where we take off the filters and get real about faith, failure, and finding freedom. I'm your host, Wesley Farnsworth, a dad, veteran, author, and a man who's learned that God does his best work in the middle of our mess. Each episode will have honest conversations with people who've walked through addiction, pain, or doubt, and with pastors, leaders, and everyday believers who are learning to live and lead authentically. So take a breath, pull up a chair, and let's get real. This is Unmasked. Today on Unmasked, I'm joined by someone whose story reminds us that no matter how dark life gets, God's grace can still break through. My guest Emilio was born with a 30% chance to live, and for the past 35 years, God has been proving that his plan is greater than the odds. From childhood trauma, mental health struggles, addiction, and broken relationships, to finding lasting freedom and purpose in Christ, Emilio's life is a testimony of what it means to truly submit to God's process. Now 6 years sober, walking in freedom from pornography and immorality, and learning what it means to live as a son of the King, Emilio's story is about redemption, identity, and restoration. Today, he's here to share how God met him in the middle of pain and turned it into a platform of purpose. Emilio, welcome to Unmasked.
Thanks for having me on here.
Absolutely. Man, so you've been through a lot. So I guess just start back to the beginning and walk us through your journey.
All right, man. So first of all, like I was born in the 90s. When I was born, I had some birth defects, and I spent like the first 6 months of my life in Iowa City. But when I was born, they told me that I had about a 30% chance to live. And I remember my mom telling me that my grandma like prayed over the thing that I was in. It's kind of like an incubator type thing. And I made it through the night, and yeah, I'm here, 35 years later. So, and God wasn't done with me yet. Um, my childhood was pretty normal, I'd say, with the exception that I didn't really have a dad in the home, but like my mom made up for it where my dad lacked. She was really good. Like like I never saw her quit, man. I never really saw her struggle, I mean, she had her own battles, man, but she held it together pretty well. She was, she's actually like one of the inspirations, so the big inspirations of my life is because like she held it together for both of us, doing a job, like working full time, going to school she's going to school for a while too, trying to take care of me, dude. I wasn't an easy kid, you know. I had a lot of behavior issues and mental health struggles, like even since I was a kid, and I wasn't an easy kid. So I definitely give her props for, sticking it out, because I know that with me, man, she had her work cut out for her. So, but yeah, I don't know. Like school was pretty cool, like I went to Grant Elementary in Waterloo before it became Walter Cunningham. It was old back in the day, back in the 90s. It's not around anymore. But yeah, I got really good grades, and I was always kind of quiet, Like I was always kind of like the introvert. I stayed to myself. Still today, that's still true today. Like I mean, I can be around people, but like when I'm by myself, it's it's when I'm charged. It's like when I get recharged is when I'm by myself. But yeah, I mean, I've had, other issues. I found out about pornography when I was about 8 years old. After that, I started smoking cigarettes, and then, cigarettes led to alcohol and marijuana, and that led to pills, and yeah, it was just a really, really early, trouble started in my life. So
Yeah, man, that's you definitely sounds like you've been through a lot. So, you mentioned you were born with only a 30% chance to live. And so recovery for you started long before you ever faced anything like addiction or anything like that. It really began at birth. So looking back,
Yeah.
how do you see God's hand on your life, even from those early years?
So my grandma always made sure that I was in the church, you know what I mean? Like my grandma always made sure that, like she always made sure that the van picked me up and, like I was always there. I was raised there. She was my Sunday school teacher, man. So that was cool that, she was able to pour her wisdom into me, and I was able to learn from my grandma and get to spend that time with her. Like I'm what they call a prodigal, like I wasn't really ignorant to the gospel. I knew it, I was a rebellious kid. That's really all I can say. When I had my choice to go to church, I didn't. I'm pretty sure that drugs and alcohol had an influence in that, because that's when I was partying and I was just like, dude, I don't really want to go to church. I'd rather hang out with my friends. So, but yeah, I mean, I've been surrounded by, Christian people that have brought me up in the faith since I was a little kid, so like the Bible verse, train up a child in the way they will go and they will not depart from it. I feel like, so I did depart from it, but I found my way back,
Hmm.
you know.
So kind of walk us through that journey from your addiction and how you found your way back to God and to the church and to your faith.
So I got married when I was 18. That's when I discovered that I was codependent. For those of you listening who don't know what codependency is, it's like the form of codependency that I had was, relationship addiction. And, I just thought like really low of myself, man. I had really low from some other past wounds, like I just felt really low of myself, and so, you know, I got married when I was like 19. It was already abusive before we got married, but, I thought really low of myself. So, it didn't matter. Then it didn't matter. Like she cheated on me, and I still stayed. And it was toxic and bad and abusive. But, uh, like my addiction while I was married, my addiction just spiraled out of control even worse than when it was before I got married. I moved to Texas and to Arizona. And when moved to Arizona, I I got prescribed like a bunch of Vicodin because basically I manipulated the doctor into making it like basically I made him believe that I had um back pain, and like I mean I did to a point, but it wasn't that bad. But it was like I made it act like I was so that I could get pills so I could get high, and like that, like I didn't really, that's when I kind of stopped caring about, my marriage, and like everything I lived, breathed, like everything I wanted to get high, because if I didn't get high, I was getting sick, and so basically, too, like, uh, you know, I didn't really, I was also addicted to porn heavily in my marriage. So, I didn't really give my wife the attention that she needed. Not looking back, I see that. Looking back, I see that I neglected her quite a bit. Should I have been married in the first place? Probably not because of, the circumstances that happened before I got married. But again, I can't go back, But she basically one day got tired of it and stepped out on me and went and found somebody else. And it had been going on for a while. Like at first, my mom caught them in the grocery store together, and she didn't tell me at first, because she didn't want to break my heart, But she's just like, "Dude, what are you doing?" To my wife, and she's like, "What are you doing? Who is this guy?" And so then one day, like I was so I was just I had this feeling, you know, that to leave work, you know, because she was going to stay at her mom's house so that she could sleep. But that's what she said, you know. So I drove by her mom's house, you know, and I left work and I drove by her mom's house and her car wasn't there. And so like she made the mistake of telling me where this dude lived at, you know, her work friend, quote unquote work friend. And so I don't know how, but I had a memory like a steel trap, even, you know, in drug addiction. And so I drove by her house. I drove by his house and I found her car there and I confronted her. And, you know, basically after that, we decided that it was just best to get a divorce. After that, you know, like I basically tried to kill myself for, you know, 6 months slowly. Like I was, just basically taking anything that I can find, like any kind of drug that I can find. You know, this is really before, you know, like this is before the fentanyl epidemic. But like I was buying pills off the street. Um, you know, like it was really, I mean, I didn't know what I was really buying. You know, like I could have been buying anything, you know, cause I mean, they make you know, they can make fake pills look real, you know? And so like I was really playing with my life, but at that, you know, at that point in moment, I didn't really care. You know, I was like, just, you know, whatever, dude, anything's better than this at this point. And then, you know, like I was on Adderall really bad. And yeah, for, you know, for 6 months, my mom and, you know, she had started going to a program called Celebrate Recovery. And she, you know, she was praying for me and she was praying for me and she had the other people at the Celebrate Recovery praying for me too. And one day I just decided, man, I'm gonna go because I'm hungry. I have food. I don't have any money. I spent all my money on drugs, you know, so I'm like, all right, fine, dude, whatever. I'll go, you know. Told her, you know, on the ride there, I was like, I'm not gonna say anything. Don't expect me to talk. I'm gonna listen. You know, when it comes to me, I'm gonna pass. You know, I've been down the whole NAAA thing, you know, like I tried to at least get some sort of help when I was in my 6 month bender, I guess. And like I was trying to kill myself, but I don't think I really wanted to die. I just wanted the pain to stop because like I was just like in a really low spot. Um, but I think, yeah, in November of that year, I lost my job. I was getting ready, November 2019. I was getting ready to lose my apartment. The repo man was looking for my truck, you know, and it was just a big mess, man. So, you know, like the last straw was I lost my job, you know? And so I called Shane, who was the Celebrate Recovery leader in Waverly at the time. And I was just like, dude, I need help. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, you know, I need to get clean or else I want out of it so bad. Like, you know, I want to get clean or else I'm going to kill myself for real. Like I'm not, you know, I'm not doing this anymore, you know? And so I went and hung out with him for the night, you know, and I got back to the house after watching the UFC fights, and, you know, and I got down on my knees and I'm just like, God, like take this away from me, please. Like, you know, actually I didn't say that. I'm like, God, like, you know, I actually offered it to him. It's like, God, I give you this addiction. You know, it's like, I don't want it. Here, take it, you know? And, I don't know. The next morning, you know, I didn't have any dope. I didn't have any pills or anything like that. So, you know, I normally would have been sick, you know, and I woke up and I wasn't sick. I didn't feel sick. I didn't, you know, have any withdrawals. And I was like, okay, that's cool. Amen. So, like, I walked outside, you know, because I still had cigarettes, you know, and I walked outside and to smoke a cigarette. It was my morning ritual, you know, and I remember everything looked brighter, you know, the sky looked brighter, the grass, look brighter, you know. I noticed flowers and clouds for the first time in I don't know how long, you know, and like it was at that moment, you know, that I knew that I was finally like that I was finally free because like it felt like my whole entire world has shifted overnight. But in my recovery though, like, getting sober, quitting the drugs was that was the easy part. It was the stuff that came after that that was the real challenge.
Wow, wow. Can you kind of, if you were to briefly do like a side by side comparison, can you kind of give a 30-second snapshot of what life was like in the throes of addiction to what your life is like now, completely removed, or even in those days when you woke up and you started, the flowers for the first time and stuff like that? Like, just do a side by side comparison of what that was like for you.
Man, I was really selfish, you know, in my addiction. You know, I only cared about myself. You know, I cared about myself and getting high and getting my drugs, you know. But now I would say that I'm, you know, pretty selfless. I mean, I could, you know, like I could work on that, you know, a little bit, you know, like there's, you know, I'm very generous. I give the shirt off my back to anybody, you know, and I give my time to people too. So, and that's the biggest thing. Like that's more than that means more to me than material things is, you know, giving people my time.
Yeah, man, time
So,
is so valuable. So you described 2019 as a major turning point for you. Go back to that, and is there a specific moment that you can think of that you were like, man, like this is the turning point. Something has to change, or I'm not going to be able to do it.
yeah, so I remember there was a time that like I was in the middle of a snowstorm or in the middle of a thunderstorm and thunder and lightning and you know what I mean? Like so I was this close to I was so close to the lightning that like literally snapped. Like it literally struck right in front of me. And I was so close to it that it fried the radio in my car. Um and you know, I was basically like, you know, I called my mom and I'm like, Mom, you know, I'm like, I don't have any money. And like music is like my therapy, you know? And I was like, you know, I'm freaking out. Like I need music in my truck. You know, and like I know that it's stupid. You know, it's stupid, but I was so far gone that like I was just like, dude, if I don't get a deck in my, you know, if I don't get a deck in my car, like I'm just done. Like I'm done. I'm gonna kill myself. You know, basically. And the police, my mom agreed to give me a new deck in my truck, and the police met me at Best Buy, and they're like, "Do we need to go to the hospital?" I'm like, "No, like I'm not gonna do anything." You know, like that was really one of the things that like I scared the crap out of my mom, dude, because like she heard me talk about that a lot, you know? Like I was just so like I was so done with the addiction that, you know, like and like feeling like I had to use drugs to survive that I was just I threatened suicide a lot, man. And I think that was the turning point that I was just like, you know what, dude, this is stupid. I'm done. And then probably like, you know, losing my job for the last time in November, you know. That's probably it too. It's like I can't keep doing this, man. So,
Yeah, you got kind of a double whammy there.
yeah.
So, what has life been like? I mean, or actually, let's go back to your visit to celebrate recovery for the first time with your mom to get dinner that day. Do you remember what was it like that first day? Like, what were your first initial impressions in it? Like, walk us through your thoughts process that night.
I mean, stepping in, man, I was scared, you know, because like I knew what I looked like. I was about 95 pounds soaking wet, man. And, you know, I didn't really want to, I didn't really want to be there, to be honest with you, man. Like I didn't want to be there at all, you know, and I just like, you know, I did. Just like, hey, I'm not going to say anything. Don't expect me to talk, you know? And I didn't. I did. I don't think I talked, for the first 4 or 5 weeks that I went there. I just listened because I was still hesitant, but even in the midst of my paranoia and anxiety, like I was met with a genuine acceptance, like they accepted me as I was, like it was, which was weird for me because, that wasn't really my church experience. Um, I had to look like them, you know what I mean? I had to look like them and I had to dress like them. I had to talk like them. And that wasn't me at that point in time, you know? And, it's still not like I'm still, walking I walk my own walk. I do, what God tells me to, and I don't try to, conform even to look like Christians. Like I do my own thing, do what God tells me to.
Yeah.
But, back, I was scared, no doubt, man. I was scared.
Yeah. That's one of the things I love about Celebrate Recovery. I don't hide that I go there as well. I've talked about it almost every chance I get because it's just such a powerful ministry. But that's one of the things I love is that you can show up and not say anything and still be accepted, and you don't have to look or dress a certain way. And so I love that you had that experience as well. In recovery, when you're going through recovery and things like that, relapses are one of the things that everyone's kind of afraid of. If I start going, I'm not going to be able to stick with it, or something's going to happen. Can you walk us through kind of your thought process on that? And were relapses something that you ever had to struggle with? And if so, how did you deal with that?
So my thought process is a little bit unconventional, to the traditional, 12-step recovery. Um, so I think that, like I look more at, recovery as, like, um, sanctification, and honestly, I put more emphasis on the Holy Spirit than I do, 12 steps. Because I've noticed I see a lot of people, secular recovery groups also, as well as, Celebrate Recovery, they put a lot of time, like stock in their time that they have, which is, I mean, I'm not saying don't do that, like it's awesome, like celebrate the milestones. But at the same time, I feel like if you put too much time in that, when you do relapse, I'm saying not when you do, but if you do relapse, because relapse isn't always a part of recovery. I feel like, there's ways that can be avoided, but if you do relapse and you put so much time into, you put so much stock into the time that you have under your belt, when you lose that, it's, it's like almost life and death, and it's really not. In the Bible it says, the righteous man falls 7 times and gets back up, and it's like if you just so happen to go back out, and it doesn't, you don't stop it, you know if you have 6 years, you don't stop it at 6 years and start back over at day one. You start back over at 6 years in a day, because like it was a mistake. You got back up. You didn't stay there. That's how I feel about relapse. You know, um, relapse. It it's not, to me. It's not really the end of the world, man. Like I've relapsed before. I relapsed actually right in the middle of step study, to be honest with you. And so, you know, just pick yourself up and move on. That's my biggest,
Yeah.
my best advice.
Yeah, I heard it said once that, especially in recovery, stumbles are going to happen or relapses are going to happen. What's important is that you stumble forward, you learn from whatever it is that you did. And use that experience and learn from it and figure out, basically you examine that and figure out what it was that caused you to relapse or stumble. And then now you have you have the information you need to put in your back pocket to prevent you from doing that again.
Yeah. I would say too, like, if you did go back out and you made a mistake and you learned a lesson, you didn't fail because you learned from it. Failure is final. Like, you only fail when you quit forever. Like if you make a mistake and you come back from it, that's a lesson. It's not a failure. It's a lesson.
Catch us up on what life is like for you now. How long have you been sober now? What is life like for you post addiction?
I've been sober for roughly about 6 years. Like I said, I've had a couple relapses in there. So with pills, like I would say, life is better now. Um, even on the hard days sober, man, it's still better. And like I say that because like, when when I was getting high and when I was, doing drugs and when I was watching pornography and all this thing, all the things like I didn't have feelings, like I was so numb to everything around me, so like even on my worst days when I feel like crap and, when I have to push myself to get out of bed, cause I have those days, um, like I thank God for those days because it's like there was times where I didn't feel anything. Um, and I did that way, I did that on purpose. But man, life is great now, man. Like it's 10 times, it's I guess I wouldn't even say 10 times better than what I imagined, like I don't even have words, like I'm going back to college, like God has restored my mind, to the point where like I was a high school dropout. I'm getting, I have a 4.0 almost right now, like I have 4 A's and 1 B, like life is great. I have a job that I love. I have an awesome church family and support. Life is good, man. Even on the hard days.
Man, that's awesome. You mentioned being sober for 6 years and now maintaining a 4.0 GPA, which, man, congratulations for that. On that, that is not
Thank you.
easy to do, especially in college. It's very powerful. What do you think has been the most surprising thing about living life on the other side of addiction?
Man, lately I've been in the season of kind of just reflection and refining and isolation. I moved to Rhinebeck about 6 months ago, probably 5 months ago, 6 months ago, something like that. Anyway, like man, God moved me out to the middle of nowhere. I didn't even have a stoplight in town. Literally, there's not even a stoplight here, man. It's so small. If you blink, you'll miss it. And I have to drive. I have to drive 30 minutes to get somewhere. And I feel like God did that on purpose. Because like I've been able to in these last 6 months, man, I've been able to just make peace with my past. Make peace with the decisions I made, which was honestly really difficult for me, because even after addiction, I was still making mistakes. I was still, being the same, I mean, I was better to a point, but I was still making the mistakes in relationships. I was emotionally unavailable. I was emotionally ignorant, I guess, like just like really, I guess not even trying, but, just replaying the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity, to accept the things I cannot change. I can't change the past. Give me the grace to accept it, you know? And not only that, but like the hardest thing for me was, I think I held myself captive more than anybody else held me captive. I brought up my past more than anybody else, because like deep down without the addiction, I'm a good person, you know? And I think the same is true for any person that struggles with addiction. Deep down, they're amazing people. They're just sick, to a point that like they have something controlling them that they can't control. And it's making them be somebody that they're not, but like making peace with that, that person in the past and allowing myself to, to acknowledge that and to grow from that person. I don't know. That's probably been the biggest, like the biggest transformation of my recovery, man, is like, accepting who I was, like allowing, being like, okay, that's who I was, not who I am. That's who I was, not who I am. That's what I did, not what I do, like I was this person, but God, right? Like those two words, man, but God changed my life, like, and even relationships from this year, God has completely, like if you haven't, like if you haven't done life with me from that point on, close, close by me, you don't recognize me, because like the internal growth that God has done in these last 5 months has been insane.
That's awesome. What would you tell somebody that is maybe in the throes of their addiction and they're like, maybe they're thinking about doing it or they're thinking about getting clean, but they're afraid to because they don't know what life is going to look like without that addiction or that hurt or whatever it is that's holding them back without it in it. What would you say to that person?
I would say that I would say, to be honest, it I'm not going to lie to you, it's not going to be easy. Um, you know, the drugs for each individual, it's different. Some people that kicking the drugs, it might be harder than others. Um, but I feel like once you kick the drugs, that's when the real fun starts. That's when the real work begins. It's when the real honesty, openness, and transparency starts. And, you start to uncover the things that made you want to use. And I want to say that when you get to that point, utilizing a community and people that like will really hold you accountable, and like going to meetings, therapy, all the things, man, do what works best for you. But, I highly recommend, at the very least, going to Celebrate Recovery as many times as you can. It's a good program. It will help you it'll help you get sober, and it will help you start to work on some of the things that, made you want to get high. So, but surround yourself with community and surround yourself with people, that aren't afraid to tell you the truth about yourself. And when they do, be ready to receive it, because, like recovery is hard, sobriety is hard, but I heard a quote that like really, it stuck out to me. It's like everything you want is on the other side of hard. I would honestly say that, you being sober is you experience things that, you know, never, people that use don't experience. And like I said, even on the hard days, man, it's such a blessing. It's a blessing to be on this side of it.
Yeah, it is. It is indeed. One of the things I'm curious to get your take on is, in recovery and just in life in general, a lot of people, they think of addictions and things like that, and they think, that's people outside of the church that struggle with it the most. But, there's a lot of people even within the church that struggle with things that some of them you can't see, things like pornography or lust or, the hidden sins, if you will. But they're in the church and they're afraid of coming forward because of what somebody might say or think, or they are afraid of coming forward because maybe they're in a leadership position and it may potentially reflect negatively on them, or, just something along those lines. What would you say to that person that's already in the church, already has their faith, but they're afraid to come forward for fear of what might happen?
Um, Man, like everybody struggles. Everybody struggles with something. If you breathe air on planet Earth, you struggle with something. Might not be every day, but it's going to be majority of the time or once in your life. You know, I think honestly to me, pornography, yes, it's bad, but I feel like if people were to come out about it, I feel like a lot more people would come out about it. Like it is bad. It's very bad. It robs men of their God-given masculinity to be protectors and providers, and to look at women the way that God intended, but a lot more people struggle with it than you think. Um and it's a lot more prevalent problem, but a lot of people don't really say anything because they're ashamed. um but that's what the enemy wants you to do, is he wants you to be ashamed. So once rip off that band-aid, and you come out about it, and you be honest, open, and transparent. You might just realize, that you might just start something. Especially as a leader in the church. Like I can't really speak to that much, but if you were to come out about it, you might get one or two reactions. You might get somebody who says, "Oh, look at them," or you might get somebody to be like, "Okay, well, you know what? I do too. I struggle with it too." But one of the lessons in Celebrate Recovery, I'm paraphrasing, but it says like God can't heal what you don't reveal. And it's in the Bible. It's I don't know, it's somewhere. It's in the Living Bible translation. I remember that part of me, that verse stuck out to me, but it's so true. Like if you hide that, God can't heal it because you won't expose it. And it's like, what do you have to lose? If it's out in the open, healing can happen. And whatever you have to do to get to that place of healing, it's worth it.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Yeah, and you mentioned the two things or the two reactions you could get, and yet you might have somebody that says, "Look at you," and that could be one of two ways. It could be, "Look at you, look what you did," or "Look at you, that was some courage right there, and now I need to come forward
Right.
and I need to follow suit." So I love that. What would you say to somebody listening who feels trapped in their addiction because of their past, and or maybe they're free of their addiction now, and they're saying, God can't use somebody like me because of what I've done? What would you say to that person?
I would honestly say that that's probably one of the biggest lies from the pit of hell, because that God can't use me because of what I've done. I've said that a lot in my life, but if you look at every person that God has used in major ways in the Bible, none of them have been perfect. The only one that's been perfect is Jesus. And he had to send Jesus because none of the other ones were perfect. But from Genesis to Revelation, you have 66 books of stories of God using flawed people. So I would say that honestly, if you are saying that God can't use me because of your past, you're in good company, because the Apostle Paul said, "I'm the chief of all sinners." He killed Christians. And if God can use him, he can use anybody. Moses, there's so many people in the Bible that God used despite their past and despite their shortcomings, and it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter how you start, it matters how you finish, and, honestly, there's going to be people that are going to be naysayers. There's going to be people that, are going to hold you accountable, or like not even really hold you accountable, because there's a difference. But there's going to be people who hold your past against you. That's actually an insecurity in them. That's a reflection of something that they're hiding, that they haven't been able to work past. So if you have any people that try to use your past against you, ignore it, because God can, God doesn't use perfect people. I mean, honestly, like he used Jesus to save us, but to minister to people, he's not going to use a perfect person to minister to a broken person, because they never have experienced what your past doesn't define you. That's not your identity. What you've done, what you've said, who you were, even last week, even yesterday, it doesn't matter what you've done. God can still use you. All you have to do is be willing and say yes. Be obedient. Don't focus so much on trying to get it right all the time. They said that David was a man after God's own heart. David was a man who slept with somebody's wife, committed adultery, and had him sent off to war. The kid, and had him killed on purpose. But he was still named the man after God's own heart in the Bible. So don't focus too much on trying to get it right. Just focus on having a pure heart before the Lord.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just take it one step at a time, right? I mean, I say all the time, you're not defined by who you are. You're not defined by how you were brought up. You're not defined by what you've done. You're only defined by who you say you are and who God says you are, more importantly. And so I think you just nailed that right on the head. And I appreciate that insight from you. So Emilio, thank you so much for being with us today here on Unmasked, and being so honest and transparent, and showing what real faith and surrender looks like, and for reminding us that God doesn't waste pain. Your story is a living proof that redemption isn't a chapter, it's a whole new book. And so thank you for your time and for sharing your story with us today.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. Well, I think that does it for us here today. Thanks so much for joining me here today. If this episode encouraged you, would you take a moment to follow, rate, and share it with somebody who you think could benefit from hearing it? For encouragement and more information on having me speak at your church or events, and for coaching services, visit wesleyfarnsworth.com. And don't forget to connect with me on social media. Until next time, remember that grace is greater than your past, and freedom begins when we all live unmasked. God bless you.